don't we start with color, number, and a word to describe your day or week?
Who's
Um,
starting it?
I can start. I'm feeling like an 8. I just got back from the gym, went swimming. It was great. I'm feeling really refreshed, and a little less tired than I was. And my color is like a sea green, and I would say amazing. Like I just was talking earlier about the Climate Justice Alliance national convening that we just held with 300 folks from around the country. So got to meet a lot of awesome people and just like a whole lot of conversation about relationship building and trust and community building. So there's a lot of
Mm,
alignment, I think, across the country around, coming to rebuild community and build kind of like our own self-reliant, self-determining kind of cooperative kind of economies in
nice.
relationship with each other. So that was really great and refreshing.
Okay.
And I will pass it to you, David.
What was the question actually? Sorry.
A word to describe your day or week, either
We're
one.
just, yeah. We'll say sky blue, 7.5, and uh, disorienting, but good.
What
It's
was
like,
disorienting?
oh, I'm kind of coming to the end of some projects and the beginning of others, and just
Yeah,
like not quite knowing what to do with yourself. Like you feel like you always should be doing something, but you're not sure what exactly it is at that moment. So,
yeah,
like, yeah, it's one bad thing about being self-employed is like you're always got to be thinking about doing the work that's in front of you, but
yeah,
then preparing for a load of work to come. So
yeah.
it's it, it's always been much easier to work for other people than it is
Hmm.
to try to budget for yourself.
Hmm. Okay. Good stuff. Miss Bombana, you want to go now?
Yeah, so sunlight, white, 8. And I guess I'll have to say, um, grateful. You know,
Hmm.
I was like, one all around the world. There are people while the news tends to kind of cover the bad things that are going on, there are a lot of people working to try to bring about um, a better world in which putting people over profit and passionate and committed and loving. And so it was, like through the CJ convening, to me it's always good to connect with others and hear about what they're doing and draw inspiration and awe from the different things that are going on. And so there were people there from Honduras and Brazil and Puerto Rico and Guam and across the United States. And so I just am so grateful, I guess, to be living at this time and be able to do the work that I do and make a contribution. But, in, um, I guess I say, in solidarity or inner relationships with everybody else. And so, you know, and then to celebrate the successes, even though there's still a lot of work to do. We have been able to bring about some changes, but a lot more is needed. So just very grateful.
Thanks, Miss Bombana. Awesome. Well, I guess we'll just jump in. I think David, before we did our check-in, just asked about updates on the CLT project. So I'll just throw some things out there and what David would love to, and Miss Pambana, love to get your thoughts on some of the things that we're thinking through and working through. So I would say probably there's just a couple main updates. One is again, one of the main issues that we're working through is the property tax issue in terms of how the properties in the community land trust will be taxed
Mhm.
and how to deal with that. And the main issue is the homestead deduction and having it assessed at the restricted resale price. So I think those are two of the challenges that we're working through with the county assessor and auditor. And we are thinking about some potential strategies we want to explore In particular, we're thinking about potentially, instead of exploring the idea of using cooperatives, which are a nonprofit cooperative, as a way to get property tax exemption, so that you don't have to worry about getting the homestead deduction, and over the long term, reducing the cost
Mm,
and the amount of money that it takes to sustain the projects, because it could be property tax exempt. So again, we don't have all those details worked out, but that's one thing that we're considering, is one, from the lens of addressing the property tax issue, because currently you can't get the homestead unless you own it, the land and the house. They basically are saying they don't really have a clear way of separating the improvement from the land.
mm.
And that,
But you're
yeah.
saying if it's considered a cooperative, there is a tax deduction that comes with that?
So just like nonprofits can apply for property tax exemption for
Uh-huh.
property that's used for charitable purposes, what
Mm-hmm.
we would do is we would submit an exemption, like, and again, there's no guarantee that we would get it, but we
Mm,
would look at, hey, if for instance, the development or housing is owned by nonprofit organizations, so the
mhm,
CLT and the cooperative maybe
mhm.
jointly own it, then it would be owned by a nonprofit organization. So we could apply for the tax exemption. So that's one thing that we're looking at. And the other side of the cooperative piece, it also, I think, in our lens to leadership development, and really requiring that people build relationships with each other, and have to develop the leadership skills to make decisions together and work through conflicts and share resources too. So that's one thing that we're thinking through. Again, we don't know exactly if that's going to be the how we proceed, and if it'll make sense, but that's kind of one thing we're thinking about.
So I'm curious, Alvin, if the homes, or even if it's an apartment complex, you could,
Yeah,
if I think a cooperative within
yeah.
the complex. But if it's like scattered homes, how would you handle the cooperative idea?
So I do think there are scattered site cooperatives. South Bend Mutual Homes was a what was it? The LIHTC, low income housing tax credit project that was like set up as a cooperative, but it was
Mhm,
scattered site.
mhm,
So I mean, I do think it's better if people are together, because then they're around each other and they're like having to, they have the same property, common things that they're maintaining, which
mhm,
make sense when they're like a cooperative.
mhm.
So it could be that, certain projects that are like focused in an area, like for instance, the first project we're working on, like they're all living next to each other, even though they have their distinct units, they
Right.
could be a part of a cooperative. They would just own, like, if there are 13 units, they would own 1/13 of the
Yeah.
cooperative, which would
I
give
can
them,
understand that, Alvin, but for me, I was wondering how
yeah,
if they weren't in the
yeah,
area together, like on different sides of town,
yeah,
or, maybe several blocks separated or something like that. That's why I
yeah,
said scattered homes versus,
yeah.
I
That's a good question, and I don't really know the answer to that. And I think
okay.
we
And my
just need to learn from others. And go ahead, David.
my biggest concern is not, and I don't have it. I don't just from past experience with cooperatives in Indianapolis
Yeah.
and in general is like um, they don't tend. You guys can talk. They don't tend to um, appreciate as well.
Hmm.
Uh, and, and I think that primarily relates to banks not. So I mean, the big issue with cooperatives will be, can we find a good way for people to finance them? Because like
Yeah.
if it's difficult or you can't find financing, it it will definitely make the value of them a lot less
Hmm.
than other homes that are on the market. So I just that's being able to mortgage your interest in the cooperative is probably the big question
Yeah.
for me.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a good question. So, and again, that might be that either we have to find the capital to be able
Mm-hmm.
to basically acquire property, the CLT itself, so that the cooperative can then basically buy it back from the CLT, or basically you become your own lender. We find a lender that is comfortable or specifically focused on cooperatives. And
Yeah.
there is like some national banks that are specifically for housing cooperatives.
Hmm.
One that presented at the housing co-op conference last fall that we were a part of that I think would be good to connect with. Um,
And you said there's already a
yeah.
cooperative in South Bend that we could contact about how they do it
Yeah, so that's
as
South
far as
Bend.
mortgages and.
Yeah, South Bend Mutual Homes. And if you know Ann Maddox,
Hmm. I know
she
Ed.
yeah, she had done a class that I was in, and she was the one who helped out getting that one set up.
Yeah. Well, then if Ann's involved, it's an excellent project. I've loved everything she does.
Awesome. Well, maybe we can get her on one of these calls one of these
Hmm.
times and she can drop some wisdom on us on
Yeah.
how it worked, how well it worked, if they would do anything different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how,
That's exciting.
so Alvin, how many CLTs are there in Indiana now? Just the one in South Bend?
So the one in South Bend has already gotten started. I think they're basically have built their first like two houses and I
Hmm.
think are like maybe in the process of selling them now.
Hmm.
Um, there's one forming in Bloomington, at least one, maybe two forming in Bloomington. The Bloomington Cooperative Living is starting one, and I think the city's housing authority is also looking at starting a CLT. Um,
And
there's a
how
group
are
in
they
Muncie
funded?
that's interested in starting one. I think a group in Evansville, and I've also heard that there's a group in Hamilton County that's thinking about starting a CLT too.
Yeah, but for the ones that have started or are building homes, so you said the one in South Bend you
I think
support,
South Bend's the only one who's like actually started building homes.
right? So, because
Yeah.
that's my question related to how were they getting around this issue of the home tax credit?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think that they have, well, one, I think they have drafted up some like a policy recommendation brief. Basically, it's, hey, here's the policies that we want to change the state law and how like stuff's taxed. So they, I think, put that together with like, I think maybe Notre Dame law, maybe Grounded Solutions help them put together some like recommended changes to Indiana law to do
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And I think they're just like moving it forward with maybe some understanding from their tax assessor on how it's going to go, but I don't really know exactly how it's going to work. I don't know if they know exactly either, 100%.
And is it financed by Light as a Lightech finance project?
I don't think so. It's like two
Oh,
houses, and I
okay,
think they're
gotcha.
home ownership too. So I'm not sure what the financing source is.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if that, yeah, putting our current Inglewood homes into a cooperative after. I mean, you can't do it until after the 15 years is up.
Yeah,
But yeah, it would be that might be a really good one to put into the co-op after the affordability period's up.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So, Alvin, how are y'all feeling about? I think the goal is to officially launch the CLT beginning of 2024 to have everything in place. How are you feeling about that?
Feel pretty good. I mean, we're just learning all the time. I think another big important piece is adding capacity on our team. That's the other update. David, I don't know if you know Nicholas Johnson.
Uh,
He used to
we're from,
work with Lisk and then IFF,
oh
and then
yeah,
he went
yeah,
out
yeah.
on his own and has been working with Kepra for the
Hmm.
last couple of years and helping us put the Kepra Integrated Fund together. So
Hmm.
in the last like 2 months, maybe 2 months, he has jumped onto the CLT team to help us like particularly like he's been working with Joe on the project, the first project, and thinking about
Sure.
through how do we make critical decisions, how do we get costs down, what makes sense. And I think that's one of the big pieces is and one having someone who has a lot more experience in development
Hmm.
and finance in the space has been an important piece. Um, yeah, so I mean, I feel pretty good. I think we're learning as we go. And, we're running into stuff like, okay, property tax is a huge issue for like, and in particular, I'll give the example of the Inglewood project, the first Inglewood project. If it's
Mhm.
assessed at $300,000 and we don't get the homestead deduction on it, that's
Mhm.
2% annual property taxes, which is like $600 a month,
Oh yeah.
which is just like
Yeah.
makes it totally unaffordable. So we were like, hey,
Well, and
we
that's
have to figure out the tax issue if we're going to make this project work. So
Mm.
that's
so
kind of, yeah,
so that's if the land trust is the deed holder for the property, correct?
correct. So if the land trust owns the land, basically the
Hmm.
auditor's position right now, not that it couldn't be challenged, but the auditor's position is that they don't own it fee simple, so they can't qualify for homestead deduction.
Okay. Huh.
So
That's
that's
kind of.
why for us, okay, well, could we use a cooperative structure so that they totally
Mhm.
own it, even though it's like collectively owned, they do own it, both the land and the building. So it's gets past that separating the land and there
How,
could be still a ground lease where like they still have some agreement between the cooperative and the CLT. That's
yeah,
kind of what we're thinking is that each has responsibilities. Like the CLT would be primarily responsible for making sure that the tax deduction is maintained or the tax exemptions maintained, helping get these like things started. Like so getting the subsidy together from the city and other sources to help start these kind of cooperative projects. And then being kind of like a support backstop. So particularly as like one challenge with, and there's a really good article that's about limited equity cooperatives and community land trusts. And I think there's like, they found like 10 examples of CLTs and limited equity cooperatives working together, and having basically CLTs that have limited equity cooperative projects and talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each. So, like a
Mhm.
limited equity cooperative, its strength is it can be much more affordable and reach much lower AMI because the individual people don't have to qualify for a traditional mortgage. And you could take other things into account, like their rent payment history, how much they've been paying, and
Mhm.
other pieces. And at the same time, so you can get like more deeply affordable than like home ownership. And it's also collective. So there's like a group that's responsible. It's not individual homeowners. And there's kind of like an institution there that is like helping make sure the project's successful. And then the CLT kind of provides that support also. So a cooperative, particularly if like you lose leadership or transitions or there's like a vacancy for a little bit, it could get potentially like destabilized. So having a second organization there, if there's a like financial challenge or leadership challenge, to kind of be there as a backstop and also a support, technical support and economic financial support is a piece the CLT brings.
so it's like the CLT in order to keep those like properties affordable, in the limited equity cooperative, is the CLT a member of the limited equity cooperative? How does the land get, or how does the properties get into the CLT?
So that's a good question. I'm not exactly sure. I think that from my understanding is there's agreements between the cooperative and the CLT that the
Hmm.
cooperative owns. The CLT is not trying to be the landlord.
Hmm.
So the actual it's owned by the cooperative, but there's certain requirements built into their basically the deed that they purchase, their owning of the land and the building is they have to follow certain things.
Mm.
And I'm not sure if that's with the ground lease or some other legal agreement, but there are certain things like, okay, you can't just like sell it for profit and cash out because this purpose of this is X, Y, and Z. So there's some kind of mechanism where the CLT can hold the cooperative accountable and vice versa. The cooperative can run its own business as long as it's within one, the requirements of the funding so that you don't violate like what the funding requires, but also so you don't violate the purpose of what we're trying to do, which is build community and provide permanently affordable housing too.
Okay.
Yeah. But we'll have more once we learn more. We'll share out. Particularly, we're gonna in October we're going up to Minneapolis to the CLT conference. There's like a Minneapolis or a Minnesota CLT conference, and we're gonna visit IX up there, which is the like a cooperative that was started by renters. Learn more about kind of how things like that work. Hopefully, talk to Ann too, Ann Maddox.
But that's a cooperative for apartments, right?
Yeah, so that's where, and again, that could be another thing that the CLT does as
Right.
like apartment buildings or developments come up for sale.
Mm-hmm.
The CLT could help the residents purchase it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Um, so that's another possible, in addition to development like the Inglewood project
Mm-hmm.
could convert apartment buildings too.
And I know, of course, I haven't seen it, Alvin, but y'all selected a logo. When will we see that?
So I can show you what we got. We've got some concepts. So we did select a concept that was the winner. We still need to like refine it.
Mm-hmm.
We just had like a bunch going on with website projects and the convening, but I can show you what
Well,
we
no, I
got.
mean, you don't have to show me now. Whenever y'all decide what it is, just, like to see it and know how you plan to use it.
Yeah, here it is. This is one of the concepts at least. There's a couple versions, and I think this is like again, just like not necessarily the final, but this was kind of the concept that was submitted in terms of the intentionality and the symbolic nature of it.
Hmm.
And it was selected by the advisory board based off of like the 8 or 9 other submissions we had.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when you say selected, is there something left to do in terms of uh, finalizing the logo for the land, the COT?
I think just completely it's just refining it, deciding on colors and
Oh, okay.
maybe tweaking stuff a little bit.
Okay, so coming up
Yeah.
with the branding colors and all of
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah. So David, you got any other thoughts? Things kicking around in
Wow.
your head?
Oh,
Opportunities you see on the horizon from your
yeah.
experience?
So I mean, yeah. I guess we're not far enough along. Do you really think we'll have a functioning CLT by the beginning of the year? Seems like there's a lot of things to get in place, but like I mean, the tax stuff seems like it could take
Yeah.
a long time just by itself. Getting that, do we? What do you anticipate we would actually be able to do as a CLT at the beginning of the year?
Well, I do think that some of it will be worked out in part through this first project with Englewood. So that project is moving forward with like the development and getting the contract from the city. And even right now, we're currently in the process of talking with the Englewood crew on an additional application for home and CDBG to do a second phase of that project.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's kind of up. We're in discussions on what that should look like and will look like. So I do think that some of the stuff will be worked out through this first project, which I think is anticipated to like, I think they're going to go to bid maybe like next month to try
Mm-hmm.
and actually get bids for actual costs and not just estimates. And I think our plan is to do construction between like now and the beginning of next year. Maybe even have some like housing available. I don't know exactly what the timeline looks or if it's changed at all, but I think the original timeline was for first quarter of next year.
Mm-hmm.
So So we'll have something in place. We get houses, then we got we got to figure it out.
Like, I mean,
Um,
would we be able to accept properties or land
yeah,
prior to, by the beginning of next year? You think? I mean, not necessarily turn around and resell them, but like if you had land that somebody wanted to donate or sell
yeah.
at a at a
I don't see why not. I mean, I think that we are one of the things that we're going to work on is potentially setting up a structure to hold the properties. It might be a
Mhm.
nonprofit organization that is a subsidiary of Kepra to start with, or file for a whole new 501(c)(3). But I think in the meantime, we could still hold properties. If people want to donate properties, we just like find a way to accept it and figure out, does it go within Kepra, or do we create an LLC to hold it? Then it's transferred to the new 501(c)(3). So I don't see why we couldn't accept
and depend
properties, but I think we do need to work out the
yeah,
program
and
piece.
depending
How's
on
the actual program going to work for like the residents?
yeah the by the way, the LLC thing, depending on like if 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 the land trust decides to do any development itself, sometimes it's a good idea to have two or three LLCs.
Yeah,
That way, like you if you're like trying to assemble properties together, you can put like one property in the name of each LLC. That way,
yeah,
I mean, somebody can still do the digging and find out that the land trust is behind it, but sometimes it makes that it makes that a lot more valuable if somebody sees that somebody's trying to uh, accumulate several parcels. Um, that's usually for a larger like multi like a multi-family dwelling. But yeah, it's
yeah.
like
You mean you don't want everyone to know you're getting all the land in in this section,
yeah,
because then they'll try and grab it up or hold it
or
or
they'll want a
sell it
lot
for a
more.
lot. Yeah,
They think they got you over a barrel, and I mean
yeah,
they'll try to sell it for more than market rate. So like
yeah,
it's I mean it's a lot of nonprofits will do that. They'll like with St. Clair Place, they held a lot of their lots in different LLCs names initially.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, have we? Is there any talk about? Well, actually, I found out that we can't do that because of state statute. But I was hoping that with the CLT, we could potentially have a replacement reserve payment that people would make, so that they would always they would you wouldn't have these big hits that people would take later on. But apparently, according to state law, you can't charge a mandatory. You can't do that. You can't. You can do
Uh,
optional, but
yeah, not I and this is what I've heard from Jason from Ground Solutions. If it's like HUD funding, like home and CDBG, it's technically
mhm.
considered a junk fee, the repair replacement reserve. So you can't require it. You can make it optional, but you can't require it. Um, though if it's again, a question for me is if it's a cooperative and that's built into their carrying costs, is that a junk fee
Mhm.
even? Yeah, I don't know if it would technically be considered a junk fee or not. And once a cooperative buys it, if as long as the cooperative members as owners qualify as like, yeah, qualified owners under like
Mhm.
the income restrictions, then it might not be any business on what kind of stuff's collected over time of the funders. That's a good question we should figure out. So
One other thing we might want to check in with like the city and some other folks who do homeowner repair too is
yeah,
if we have a cooperative ownership, can they do homeowner repair projects on those utilizing CDBG
yeah,
or the other folks who do homeowner repair? It's like that could put people like if they need a new roof. I mean, this is going to be 30 years from now potentially,
yeah.
but yeah, it might be good to find out if there's any obstacles, at least right now, to doing
Mhm.
homeowner repairs on co-ops.
Yeah, I'm gonna start writing all your questions down, David.
Does oh gosh, I just totally forgot his name. Um, the other real estate agent, oh, is he still active on the
Are you talking about
CLT?
Tad?
Thank you, Tad Eshelman. Yeah, I just totally spaced his name.
Yeah. I think I was text with Tad maybe like a month ago, month and a
Hmm.
half ago, but I haven't seen him in a little bit.
Okay. I was just wondering where, yeah, I
Yeah.
know he was pretty active early on, but
Yeah. Need to get back in touch with him.
yeah. Hmm.
Can you So, David, just to rehash your questions, can you use CDBG and home or CDBG for like and the city's home repair dollars if it's a
Yeah.
cooperative?
Hmm. And we might ask the same of some of the other sources too, like
Yeah.
the Federal Home Loan Bank also has homeowner repair dollars that you can access
Mm.
to, the NIP program.
So Alvin, by January, will y'all have decided what type of pilots? I know you're working with Inglewood, so that's kind of like a pilot, but what other types of pilots y'all plan to try to implement in 2024?
We shall see. I think we're working on it. I think we did have that. Again, the home buyer choice was one that we were looking at, where again the DLT provides the subsidy, but it really might hinge on the property tax question. If
Hmm.
cooperatives help us address the property tax issue, then it might be focused on cooperative development or incubation, whether that's existing units. And again, we definitely want to explore the conversion of existing housing into CLT or cooperative housing because
Hmm.
of how high construction costs are right now.
Mm-hmm.
We do think that that is going to be a good avenue for doing lower cost, more affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
Again,
Yeah.
how exactly where those opportunities might come from. And David, you might be able to speak to it. Like as a realtor, how do you find out about um, landlords who are interested in offloading inventory, whether that's multifamily or individual single family homes?
I mean, of course, the MLS regularly has like listings where you'll see like this property's for sale in combination with these other BLT numbers. So keeping an eye on property on the MLS on you've kind of unfortunately that takes a lot of individual reading of listings. It's kind of hard to search for that. It's not it's usually just mentioned in comments, so you can't really search for multiple. Like, yeah, particularly when it's an apartment building, it's easy. When it's one landlord trying to sell 7 different properties, each property is a separate listing, and so, but usually in the listing it references all the other MLS numbers of that same if they're in that same package. A lot of times it'll say $600,000 or whatever, and it'll have like 5 MLS numbers, but each one has, but you can only have one address per MLS number. So it's that's the tricky thing with that.
What do you think about that as a strategy?
About acquiring,
Yeah, acquiring from landlords who are offloading packages
yeah,
or individual buildings.
yeah, they're gonna need significant work. Those properties, typically, I mean, they're gonna be probably pretty beat up by tenants, but so are you saying for those to be available to the tenants that are currently in the properties, or because that creates some other obstacles too, like doing doing rehab while with somebody in it
Yeah,
becomes very, very difficult and
yeah,
more expensive to do it while they're there.
yeah. I think if we were acquiring buildings, we would ideally want to give people the option
Hmm.
to stay in the building, or if it's going to be rehabbed, maybe there's some temporary housing that we can arrange
Yeah.
that for the folks who are staying. I mean, I'm even thinking of like properties that Kepper has potentially, or even other properties we could leverage in community on a
Or if you're doing
temporary basis.
if you're doing it as a larger scale,
Yeah,
let's say you buy 5 properties,
yeah,
you have one that you start with one that's empty, maybe
yeah,
you get it rehabbed, you talk to the other tenants. Do you want to continue to live in your house? Oh yeah, I'd love to. Well,
Yeah.
great. Would you be willing to move to this other one that we've already got finished
Yeah.
for 6 months, for 6 months while we rehab your house and then help you buy that one back?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it's a lot more staging, and it's not going to be easy to do it that way,
Yeah.
but it's worthwhile. The other thing I've wondered too is like you've got to be careful doing it because you want to make sure people know they're not being taken advantage of. But
Yeah.
I also value keeping existing homeowners in the neighborhood of say an old lady whose house is falling down around them, of being able to go in and do something similar for them, of fixing up the house to be really nice, put $60,000-$70,000 into that house, and then and it becomes part of the CLT at that point. They they have to know that they're not going to get as much for the house as they would have had they. I
Yeah.
mean, and it really kind of depends on the person's age. I mean, if it's somebody's 70, it's not as big of a deal as if they're 50 and they want to do that. Like, I mean, if they're 70, they're only going to get 10 to 20 years of appreciation. If he was 50, he could have a lot more depending on how long they live there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd love that for that to be something we consider as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one you just got to. It's going to be heavy on the education and making sure that people read everything, actually read it to them. A lot of
Yeah.
times, like try to discourage them from doing it. Let them know all the disadvantages of it strongly, but
Yeah.
you're never accused later of taking advantage of somebody again.
Yeah.
I realize it's always something that could be out there, particularly not usually for the person, but a lot of times their family members like,
Yeah.
you did what to my mom? And
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately they're probably going to net more out of that house anyway. So like right now in my neighborhood, kind of a crappy house that needs a lot of rehab will sell for like 60 to 100,000. One that's been rehabbed will sell for 200 to 250. So like in some ways, putting even though they don't, yeah, they don't, they won't get as much appreciation. They may actually come out, depending on how long they stay there, they may come out net better ahead anyways, just because
Yeah.
when they do sell, they'll be selling a lot better house than the house they would have been in had they stayed there for 15 years and not done any significant repairs.
Yeah.
So
Any other questions or ideas or thoughts for us to explore further?
not right now. I'll think of 10 later though.
Okay, if you think of them, shoot it to us.
All right.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll go ahead and close it out here unless anyone has
Sounds
anything
good.
else.
Nope. It's good
Well,
to see
David,
both of you.
thank you for coming.
All right.
Bye, David.
Have
Bye,
a good
Bye.
Alan.
evening. Appreciate y'all.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.